It has been said that death is both an end and a beginning. As the leader Kim Jong-un lay dying and the people of his nation mourned his passing, a new path was being charted by the heir apparent. Something of a hidden figure in the international community, Kim Jong-un emerged from his seclusion and stunned the world. He spoke of peace and of reconciliation, of opening his country to the world. But perhaps more surprisingly, he followed through. Within 2 years of taking power, Un had taken active steps to distance himself from his father's reign, closing forced labor camps, formally negotiating peace with the South Korean government, and sweeping away the DMZ that had for so long divided the two nations. He even took the first tentative steps of integrating the two nations' economy. Soon thereafter, North Korea embraced market-style reforms and their economy began to grow, even as the rest of the world fell into economic hardship. The vast factories in China falling silent and store shelves the world over growing empty. Whether from the loss of jobs or pressure from their northern neighbor, Korean nationalism soared, and many came to blame the United States for the global economic downturn, spurring tension between the United States and the Korean republics. Playing upon this rising nationalism, the two Koreas became one, and with much fanfare, Kim Jong-un was overwhelmingly swept in as the newly united Greater Korean Republic's first president. His first actions, putting to work millions of unskilled and poor workers. To this end, a multitude of foreign technologies were imported from across the world, dissected to master both its use and its manufacturing. Their investment paid dividends as the nation's economy came to be one of the largest in East Asia. Their newfound revenue was reinvested in the country, utilized to modernize the country's aging military equipment, phasing out their vast Cold War stockpiles. And with the retreat of the United States and the weakening of China, Korea stood as the dominant power in East Asia. Even so, Un was careful in all international actions. Each one was orchestrated to highlight the nation's new path, presenting to the world a nation of futuristic cosmopolitan cities and idyllic farmlands. A peaceful, multi-party democracy committed to protecting and preserving civil rights. Yet to many, the truth remained clear. The machinations of control first crafted under Kim Jong-il had been perfected under Un. Critics of the regime disappeared or received threatening letters. Politicians who refused to join Un's new Chosun party found themselves attacked by mobs or were pressured into silence. The shining democracy that was South Korea seemingly has been fully subsumed by the nationalism and radicalism of their northern neighbor. This nationalism turned to rage, as the nightly news cycle repeatedly broadcast the desperate cries of the Korean diaspora in Japan. Racial violence and riots had culminated in the death of tens of thousands. Such deaths the Greater Korean Republic fervently condemned, and when Un spoke before the United Nations, he refused to sit idly by, proclaiming a heavenly mandate to protect those being murdered. Not long afterwards, the Korean People's Army marched to war, securing a number of strategic positions and flooding the southern coast of Japan with radioactive fallout. Japan was forced to capitulate, being reduced to a vassal state, the first of many within the Greater Korean Republic. And as America withdrew to their own shores, Korea utilized its newfound military and economic power, bringing the economically struggling nations of East Asia under their banner. Initially, this was touted as a transformative economic alliance, when in fact it transformed into a recruiting pool for the Korean People's Army, promising full employment for recruits' families, fuel rations, and other economic benefits. The KPA swelled to over 25 million personnel, with an additional 5 million strong permanent expeditionary force, becoming the largest standing army in the world, and gaining combat experience in peacekeeping operations in Iraq and Nigeria. Even so, this union was not enough. Perhaps looking for resources to ensure long-term sustainable growth, or perhaps motivated by revenge, Un looked beyond the Pacific to the United States, where Korean agents under the command of Yi Dae-hyun were dispatched. Under deep cover, they ingratiated themselves into their communities. Some married and had kids, all the while reporting back America's internal situation. They noted the deteriorating infrastructure, the rise of H5N1, and the nation's self-imposed quarantine. They reported of the enactment of martial law and the breakdown of social order across America's major cities, reporting that America was ripe for the taking. Upon these reports, Korea began operations against the beleaguered United States, starting with large-scale cyber attacks, targeting U.S. military installations and critical civilian infrastructure. The chaos from such efforts was but a mere foreshadowing of what the greater Korean military was capable of. On January 15th of 2025, a Korean satellite detonated a high-altitude nuclear device over Kansas. The resulting electromagnetic pulse crippled America's infrastructure, plunging the continent into darkness. The ensuing chaos provided cover for Korean forces, who moved rapidly, occupying Hawaii and landing in large numbers across America's Pacific coast, their elite paratrooper units descending upon America's heartland in a campaign of rapid dominance, only stopping when they reached the shores of the Mississippi. There they recognized no peace with the American remnants. And so the Mississippi was transformed. The river and surrounding lands were doused with specially made chemical weapons, imbued with radioactive particulates and deadly to touch or ingestion. Its limited effective life forced elite units of the KPA to remain near the river to reintroduce the compound as needed. Within their occupied territories, a protectorate state was established, a state whose sole purpose was stripping its territory of resources. Its inhabitants were something to be controlled lest they get delusions of independence. Their children sent to schools under Korean oversight. Populations were to be consolidated and sent to secure camps. Those deemed crucial or beneficial to the greater Korean Republic were reduced to state slaves, and should resistance rear its head, overwhelming firepower was brought to bear, and a number of cities were effectively erased from the map. Yet, in spite of the KPA's best efforts, their control beyond major cities is limited. Roving bands of resistance fighters, dug-in survivalist and surviving American military units threaten Korea's already tenuous hold. Compounded by rumors of growing resistance movements in their own member nations, and the seeming mobilization of the European Union, it remains to be seen whether Korea can hold on to what it has taken.